Hello and welcome back to the podcast, We Are Selling. My name's Lee Woodward, your coach and host and the author of the Complete Salesperson course and Claiming Doors. Today's episode is part 3 of 10 steps to mastering the auction process featuring Mr. Danny Grant. In parts 1 and 2, we've already discussed the steps of list to sell. Step 2 is getting the price right, the property presentation. Then we moved into the marketing fundamentals. Know the property was number 5. Number 6, your vendor relationships. 7, cooking the buyers, which means we are now up to point 8. We're going to jump straight into that point. And welcome back, Danny Grant. Well, that brings us to point number 8. We're 80% there in this wonderful world that we live in today. We've been recommending, Danny, depending on their state, get all your building and pest reports done first, strata reports. Don't be a sales prevention officer. People want to make a decision and move forward. Take us into dealing and building with inspectors and solicitors.
Oh, yeah. Look, so depending on where you are in the state, like in Queensland, agents preparing their own contracts, solicitors are not as big a deal as they are in other states. In New South Wales, a request for a contract and giving it to solicitor is an indication of interest. I think you need to have an understanding of the contract. You need to read your contract. It's a revolution, Lee, to read your contract before you start the campaign. What special conditions are in there? Is there anything weird in there that's going to hold back the sale? Deposit clauses, etc. Ring the solicitor, have a conversation with them, get to know them. Solicitors, by the way, can be fantastic referrers, even if they're crusty. Give them a little gift at the end and a thank you card, and it'll do wonders for your career. But doing a building report as well that's not a glowing report. It is a list of defects. That's a great thing to take in your set to sell meeting for the vendor. A, the house is not as perfect as what they thought it was, but B, you can head off if there are any issues. Maybe there's a bit of a leak in the roof and it's an easy fix with a few tiles. So let's head that off beforehand. If there is something major and we're not going to fix it, better off telling the buyer before they get the report. Just letting you know before you get the report, you're going to find that there is this past termite damage. It's been cleared now, but it's going to cost you probably, $1,500 to fix that timber there. We just didn't want to do it because it's right in the hallway and we didn't have time to do it, right? That's a much nicer way than them finding it in a report. But also I've had instances where buyers have gotten their own building inspections and they've tried to negotiate on something, like a roof. They've said the roof is really bad and go, oh, that's interesting because my report said it wasn't so bad. And they go, oh. So suddenly you've got a report to balance it off. But also, Lee, you need to have an understanding of houses. So how they're built, Federation, post-war, whatever it may be. So Federation in my area, they're always damp, right? The roofs always need replacing, right? So if every house had damp course fixed in the suburb and every roof was replaced, well, the values would all be adjusted accordingly. So you need to kind of understand what's big, what's not, because some buyers just really don't understand it. And I think it pays to sit down with a building inspector and have a look at what they're looking for. Just go and have a coffee with one, a good one in your area. And a tip here, Lee, is don't use dodgy building inspectors for your properties. No one listening, none of our listeners will be doing that, but be really careful. If they're too quick and they're just generic reports, there's been certainly plenty of cases of agents been taken to court for recommending certain building inspectors, but it's not good for your career. Run a clean pair of heels for your business.
Which brings us to number 9, auction day strategy meeting, which is usually done on which you have visited. When it was originally on the market, it was going to need a big renovation, but down the right-hand side of the property was an enormous dish drain, a stormwater dish drain. And people would walk around there and just freak out and run. Yet I checked it out and the dish drain had no longer in use and we're allowed to concrete over it and put a concrete path in. And it was an existing dish drain from a couple of streets up, but it was no longer in use once you found out from council. So how many people may have gone ahead if they did some investigation or it was investigated? But on first sight, it looked like a war zone. But I was fortunate prior to real estate, I was a plumber.
So let's just say, Lee, I've got 3 buyers that I suspect are going to register to bid. And I ring them and I say, look, Lee, I just wanted to have a conversation with you around auction day and giving you a bit of a strategy because I found on my last few auctions that The ones that have gone away really disappointed just haven't gone into it prepared with a strategy and wish they had have, been a bit better prepared and regret not, bidding harder. So I'm going to talk to you about a few prices. The first one is, what's the price that, Lee, you would be happy to buy it at any day of the week? You'd be ecstatic with that. Now, you might answer me and say, oh, I'd love to get it at $1 million. Well, what I found, Lee, is that most buyers are happy to make that their first bid. Would you be happy to make that your opening bid? Oh, well, yeah. Well, you'd buy it at $1 million every day of the week, so make that your first bid. Yeah, I would. The second one is that the market value. Where would you expect that the vendor is going to set the reserve? Now, within reason, let's not be silly about it, but where would you expect the vendor is going to set the reserve? Now, not everyone will answer that, but some will. And some will go, oh, look, I'd expect they'd probably set it at around 1.1. Okay, the third price I want to talk to you about is push comes to shove, what you're going to pay. Now, I don't want to know that price. Obviously, you're not going to tell me, and you may not even know it now, but you need to think about push comes to shove, what am I going to pay? The fourth price, Lee, is what's your walk-away price? What are you absolutely happy to walk away? So you're better off thinking about those last two now so you don't walk away from this with regret. Now, what I'm doing is I'm getting in early, getting in to really think about, oh, geez, I haven't really thought about that. I've thought about where I'm expecting the reserve to be, and what my hope price is, but I haven't thought about, geez, what are we going to really push to? Now, when I have my vendor meeting, I can say, Lee, the three buyers said, I've got a starting bid at 9. I've said one it's at 9, one's at 950, one's at $1 million. Now, when I have instructions with the auctioneer, what am I going to say? Don't start less than $1 million, right? Because I know I've got a bidder in the room that's going to bid $1 million as their starting price, right? So that makes the auction day much easier. I've got an opening bid to start, and we're away. We've got people competing. Now, it might not be that person bids $1 million. It might be the other person gets in with 950. We choose to accept it, whatever. But I got to tell you, Lee, that the three buyers, I did ask them, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek what I'd expect their reserve to be, and I asked them to be reasonable, and they all said around 1.1. Now, oh, yeah, but Danny, they're not going to tell you the exact. You go, no, I agree with you. But what I've found, Lee, is that most of them are within about 7% on average where my auctions are finished up. They're about 7% under where it finishes up. So if we add that on, that's a reserve of, well, I failed maths at school, Lee, but let's just say it's 1.2. It's a much more intelligent conversation about setting the reserve.
Yeah, very much so.
And then, you need to go into these meetings with a bit of an agenda. You need to say how the marketing has gone. What's the expectations on the day? I want you sort of upstairs in the master bedroom. So, you're not being seen giving high fives when we go past reserve. It's treat it like a normal open house. Go away, come back 5 minutes beforehand. We'll talk to the auctioneer, talk about my positioning and what I'm going to do. I'm not going to come and see you when it's at reserve. I'm just going to come and see you when it's strained and the bidding stops. Now, hopefully that is past reserve, and then I'm just coming up and we're confirming, but I will come and see you. Because if I move, Lee, right on the exact reserve amount and I go up and see you, I've immediately, with my body language, told all the buyers that that's where the reserve was, and they might think, geez, now I'm paying too much. And then when we get into the setting the reserve, it's kind of like a two-price thing. It's what's your want price, which I don't really care about, right? But they feel like, okay, I'm going to push to that want price. I'd love to get it, but what's your bare minimum? If it comes within 5,000 of that, you're definitely not going to sell. And if you go, well, Danny, we wouldn't sell under, 1.2. We wouldn't sell under 125. Okay, well, what happens if the bidding does stop at 1.22? What do you want me to do? Well, you can come and have a conversation with me, Danny, can't you? So I know the real reserve's probably 2.2 or somewhere at around 1.2. Now, I don't need to, again, force creates resistance. I don't need to get it exact, but that's enough for me to know that, okay, there is a bit of movement there. But I really need them to be real. Now, I've had occasions, Lee, now in New South Wales, we get the reserve early. That's fine with price guides. I've refused reserve sometimes on a Thursday night. Gone, it's too high, Lee. I need you to think about that overnight. Now, that might sound harsh, but we've got to get real in this conversation, because I do not want a strong, good bidder walking out of that auction room and then having this conversation in 2 months' time where the bank's calling you and you can't sell, So it's your duty to get them real about this reserve so I can set a strategy on the day.
That is so powerful. And I actually love how you pause that And that brings us to point number 10, managing the auction day.
Look, the key to this is not being stressed as much as possible. And that is preparation stops you being stressed late. Have everything ready, have your auction day packs, get there early, have buyers pre-registered. If you're in New South Wales, you're going to pre-register in Queensland. I think it's a borderline arrogant for you to your first meeting on auction day with the buyers is on the auction floor, right? You've got to have a chat with them before the auction starts. So what I used to do is I'd stand out the front on auction day and I'd be the one taking the names and numbers and Diane would be in the back doing registrations. Relieved my anxiety a little bit because I could check them off my list when they came through, but it was like a little greeting. I could say, hi, how you feeling? Just confirming where you said your opening bid would be. We're going to be in the backyard. I'll come and see you again. So once we've got everybody registered, I'd bring the auctioneer and I'd sort of say to them, I need speech 22 today or whatever it may be. Speech 22 was always, we're not aligned on reserve. Please put a fear of God into them for me to make them real. Sometimes they listen to the auctioneer. Sometimes I've got it. I don't really need him to do anything. The vendors are aligned and we don't need that. All my vendors are too nervy, of which we don't need a hard, we need to pull back a little bit, right? Because they are humans. They do get nervous. So we're going to be careful about how much we do push. There's a difference between them being arrogant or them just being really nervous. Then when the auction starts, I let the auctioneer go through terms and conditions. It's important that they listen to that. Then as soon as he starts or she starts talking about the features of the house, I go and greet who I think is my strongest bidder first. So I have a conversation with them and I say, look, Lee, I'm not going to get in your way today. You know what you're doing, but just keep your hand in the air and you actually win. If I need to come and convey something to you, I will, but otherwise, good luck. We have a little smile. I shake hands. All the other buyers are watching what I'm doing. Then I go to my second best buyer, my third best buyer, etc., the neighbour down the road, whatever it may be, right? So there's this little signal. Now, one of the things I'm doing there is also if I've got two good buyers next to each other, I'm going to move one of them, all right, because they're going to feel a bit uncomfortable. I don't want them to feel like, oh, this is awkward now. Someone's bidding right in front of me. I don't want that impediment. Once that's happened, we're calling for the opening bid. Sometimes the opening bid doesn't come, even though I've set it up. I'll let it sit for a little bit. And then as soon as I go to approach that person that said they were going to put in that $1 million bid, as soon as you make that eye contact and nod, they'll always bid. It just happens that way. As long as you've set it up well. And then it's not going buyer to buyer. You've got to be careful with kind of, I'm trying to get money out of you. I'm trying to get money out of you. You've got to know when the right time is to press and when the right time is to pull back. Don't go to your highest bidder. If they're bidding comfortably, they don't need your help. They don't need you. If there's good bidding with the auctioneer, going backwards and forwards, don't get in the way of that. He's doing that negotiation for you. If you feel somebody's sitting back a little bit, then you need to approach them. One of the things that you get good at when you do a lot of auctions is reading body language, right? So what people will do, if they're abstaining from bidding, they'll normally have their arms folded and they're really focused on the bids and the auctioneer, right? And if you go to approach them, they'll normally kind of look at you quickly, but they're trying to get back to the auctioneer. They're still going to bid. But if you watch them and they then bid and then suddenly they stop, you see this wave of relaxation come across them, the arms become unfolded and they're looking everywhere else and what's going on and they're engaging with all the other bidders, right? They're out. So that's when I would then approach them and they go, I try and get them to nod and I'd nod at them and say, are you out? And I'd nod up and down because I don't want them to see them nodding, side to side. Up and down is what we want people to see. And then I'll ask them just out of interest, Lee, where were you going to bid up to? I was out at 1.15, Daniel. Good information for my vendor later. And then, sometimes there's circumstances where people are so nervous and you've got to remove them from the auction, Lee. I've had circumstances where they're so nervous and I know they're good bidders and I'll go, look, just come in the other room. Tell the auctioneer to stop. I'll give you a little bit of time. If they're hyperventilating, so you got to, don't just think, well, the auctioneer's got to go to the next auction. Bugger them. It's your auction, it's your show. Make sure the buyers are comfortable enough that they can bid and bid freely. So that's a little bit of working the floor. Like I could do a whole day course on working the floor, but the one thing about this, Lee, is don't overthink working the floor. I think so many people do. If you've done your job beforehand and you've set up your opening bid and you've got a good relationship with your buyers, it'll flow nicely for you.
Danny, what if it fails? Like if it sells and everyone's jumping and screaming, the alcohol's blowing and everyone's signing, that's wonderful. But what happens for you if it fails?
I just leave and go to the next open house and let Di deal with it. No. Look, it's. I think you need to have a plan B in your reserve meeting. That's not going to go well. I've had campaigns where I've known I've got heaps of bidders, but I've always had a plan B. If it doesn't go well, this is what the plan is. So look, there's different ways of this. If you've got one buyer and you've only got one buyer that's registered, you're better off going up to that buyer and saying, look, you're the sole registration today. Did you come here to buy? Yeah, I did. Okay, well, this is what we're going to do. I'm not going to bid against you. If you can put in a bid and it's a reasonable bid, then I'll go to the vendor, et cetera. Or it might be that you're going to put in a vendor bid and get them to bid over it, whatever it may be. You're better off being upfront straight away with that buyer. So there's no games and saying, oh, I had 10 other buyers, but they couldn't show up today. You sort of say, look, there's been other buyers interested, but not everybody's ready on auction day. They may be ready next week. I'm not sure. I'd rather get it done today. If you've come here to buy, let's try and get it done. And then you've got to move quickly. I always remember, Lee, I had this one bidder auction, did that scenario, and we were going for about an hour negotiating. And I finally got an agreed price from the buyer. And I went upstairs and told the vendors, they agreed. And when I came back downstairs, the buyers were gone, Lee.
Yeah, wow.
And I thought, okay, this is weird. And then I remember walking out the front of the house, looking down the street, and I could see this couple, well, there's my buyers, right? Quickly walking away and looking back. And you go, shit, what do I do now? I don't know what to do. But what that taught me is you've got to be pre-prepared and you've got to move quick. Now, I couldn't get them to put that offer on a contract. If anyone listening thinks, we should have got it signed, they wouldn't do that. But it taught me that, you got about 20 minutes, I reckon, before it gets too strained and then people just walk away from it. If you've got no bidders, right? Now, I've had auctions where I've had people come up and we've had no bidding and they've gone, geez, that was really good. What did it sell for? You go, didn't sell. There was no bids. So you still got to be positive. Don't look too unhappy and just say, look, we're hoping to get it done next week, whatever it may be. I think you need to have a meeting with your vendors there and then and what you're going to do, and now that might be putting a price on it. It might be doing a re-auction, but you need to have a strategy straight away. Why? Because they're going to wake up Sunday morning and they're going to think, did I pick the right agent? So what I would do on a Sunday is after we've had that strategy meeting of what next, I'd put it all in writing and I'd drop it off to them or I'd email them or whatever it may be. And that is, here's all the buyers that pulled out and why. This is what we're going to do next week. If by Wednesday we don't get a great response, we're going to need to do X. You've always got to have a next strategy because if you just lose all hope and you stop communicating, they're going to communicate with one of your competitors and you're going to lose the business. So you've got to have a plan B before you even get there, right? So they know straight away, right, this is what we do. And most of the time it is, let's put a price on it today.
And Danny, that's your a way forward email, which, is there to support the owner. It's got its own little case study in it. And because the owners want to know you're still committed, you're going to super glue yourself to it. And having a way forward email is a very powerful way of wrapping that up.
Yeah, being positive when buyers ring about, what happened? Yeah, no, I know. I expected it to sell, but I've had a lot of calls today and hoping to get it done by the end of the week. You've always got to be positive and have that energy because people pick up on it. You certainly just don't want it to just fall away and decline because when another agent picks up a failed auction, it's normally because of energy, and they've got a plan and it's something different because we're going nowhere with this current agent.
Well, Danny Grant, that was an unbelievable 10-point plan around the auction process and how detailed you've done that. And I wondered if we were going to get that in a We Are Selling episode, but we have. And one thing about this show is we've discussed depth of interest today, but depth of content was absolutely fantastic. And Danny, thank you for joining us.